Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it may be when you guys are tuning into this broadcast. I am your international award winning author, literary extraordinary, and all inspiring coach. But as I always say on Friday, today I am just a happy Green Party member coming to you with other Green Party members. And so we want to talk politics on today. In fact, we have been spending the last, I want to say, 6 weeks talking about 10 key values of the Green Party. We did our first week on, let's see if I got this, grassroots democracy. Week 2 was on social justice. Week 3, ecological wisdom. Week 4, nonviolence. Last week we talked about, what did we talk about last week, David? How did I go that many weeks?
Decentralization.
Decentralization. I was so good. I was going so well. And then today we are going to be talking about community-based economics. And so joining me today, as you guys already know, David, Rych, but we have two new faces to the panel. We have Calvin as well as Rita. And so we're going to start in a clockwise motion. Let me go this way. In a clockwise motion. So Calvin, you introduce yourself, then David, then Rita. Let everybody know who you guys are and why it is that you became a member of the Green Party.
All right. Hi, my name is Calvin. Hopefully the mic's picking me up. I am a new official Green Party member, but I have been aligned with the Green Party values for a very long time, and I'm glad that it's official now. I am doing an effort to show solidarity with Amazon workers unionizing in Bessemer, Alabama. And there's events going on all around the country. And that's what I'm excited to talk about today, a little bit of community organizing.
Awesome. Awesome. Come on, David, even though, they know you by now, but still go ahead and act like they do.
Okay. My name is David Rych. Thanks for having me back. I'm having a great time. Yeah, I've been on all the shows of this series so far. Love it. Look forward to it every week. I'm a member of the Green Party since just a little bit after the election. Last November, I became one. I come from the Libertarian Party over to here, which to some might seem like an extreme chasm between the two, but in a lot of ways it wasn't, because I was always a libertarian socialist within the Green Party, or in the Libertarian Party, fighting with all the libertarian capitalists who don't really understand what libertarianism actually is. So as I read about the Green Party platform, like I said before, I just agreed with absolutely everything. It was a no-brainer. After the election was over, because I was running for an office as a libertarian, I was glad to get out of that party and become a member of the Green Party, and I've been having a great time ever since. Extremely fulfilling. There's something very comforting about finding your political home. Your solace, your refuge. It's very cool, and I love it. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's always a pleasure. Come on, Miss Rita, another woman on the panel. So come on, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Rita Maniotis. I am the former chair of the Cook County Green Party, and I'm presently the Berwyn Township Committeeman of the Green Party. I've been a Green a long time, since 2006, when I got involved in just gathering signatures. But I got introduced to the Green Party when I lived out in California, and I was running an environmental radio program and started talking to Greens on the show. And I thought, oh, it's really interesting. So I really didn't get involved until 2006, and I've been involved ever since. And I even run for office in 2008 for state rep, and I've run for school board a few times in my area.
Nice. Awesome. So you are coming to us with the most green experience, 15 years worth. So we gladly welcome you, as well as Calvin and David. Welcome back. So I have a question, but right before I jump into that, let me tell all of those who may be watching, as you guys are watching the program, if you become interested in being a member of the Green Party, then feel free to go to our website, www.ilgp.org. You can always send an email if you have any questions, also to info@ilgp.org. So we want to jump right into the question at hand today, which is all about community-based economics. So Calvin, since you said this is why you are so excited about being here, the first question on the board is, what comes to mind when you hear community-based economics?
Community-based economics. I think we've always had democracy as an ideal that Americans hold dear, and I think it's valued around the world. And that's the idea of taking everybody's input and making decisions based on what's the best interest for everybody. So I'm a huge proponent of democracy at the workplace, because it's where we spend a majority of our waking days during our working years. And to not have democracy there, to not have community representation, to not have a place where you feel like you have a voice and you have a collective choice, I think is really sad. So I love the idea of pushing for more awareness of worker cooperatives, where everybody's a co-worker owner and you make direct democracy decisions on major business decisions, as well as democracy in the form of a union that can do collective bargaining on your behalf when it comes to voting for your union reps and them negotiating on your behalf. So I see community organizing and community economics to be taking the will of the people, distilling it through democracy, understanding it, seeing where everybody stands, and then working in the best interest of everybody.
That's awesome. Rita, got something to add to that? When you hear community-based economics, what do you think?
Well, I love this topic because it involves so many green values. It involves what you were talking about last week, decentralization. It involves environment, respect for diversity, involves all of these things. And so community-based economics to me is having the dollars circulate in your community as much as possible. So you keep the economic base in your community. And Calvin was talking about one way that you can do that. But there's lots of ways that you can do that. But it really basically is everybody in the community needs to do that old adage, think global, act local. And then you can keep the dollars in your community. And there's lots of different things that I'd love to talk about here, but that's just my introduction to it.
That's awesome. I love that. Think global, act local. Come on, David, wrap it up. What is it that you think of when you hear, and for Calvin and Rita, I don't know if you guys been watching, but David is kind of like our moral police. So whenever we talk about things, I like to hear it generically, but also then specifically as it pertains to from that morality perspective. So when you think community-based economics, David, what comes to your mind?
Well, I think all that Calvin and Rita talked about, unions and co-ops are a huge part of it, because you want the workers to have ownership of their labor within their community and the benefits that go from their labor back to their community. I think that you want to talk about morality. There's a thing called ethical consumerism, which really started in the UK a while back, and basically it just talks about keeping things local. In order to make sure that your community is thriving enough and not contingent about outside authorities or forces or anything else, to try to be as independent as possible. There's even what's called the Ithaca, I don't know how to pronounce it, hour, which is in Ithaca, New York.
Ithaca.
They have
Ithaca, New York.
Thank you. That's right. Ithaca. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Ithaca, New York had this thing called the Ithaca hour. Basically, it was their own independent currency, and they just use it within their community to trade for goods and products and pay for salaries and pay wages within their community. Now, I don't know much about the extent of how it worked or didn't work. Now, I know we have Bitcoin now, and we have these alternative currencies going on. It baffles me that the American government isn't shutting down alternative currencies, but I'm glad they're not. I know the American government doesn't like economic competition. They really don't. But the notion of having to depend on one sort of currency amongst like an entire nation, if not a world, can be very dangerous, because if it collapses over here, it has massive effects throughout the rest of the web, of which you're doing nothing, and all of a sudden your dollar is worthless. That sort of thing. Local is always better because, as I said last week about decentralization, when I was studying system science, one of the adages or standards was that a sufficiently complex system tends to be more efficient when it's decentralized, because there's too many variables in a complex system for any small group of people to commandeer all of them and all the changes and all the reconfigurations. So local is always better. Plus, you tend to know people better in a local setting, and you can talk to people, people. I think you should even get on board with like, this isn't exactly economics, but is in a way is like like a local council for police departments, where local members of the local community, they hire the police, they fire the police, they set the standards of what the police can and cannot do in their community, instead of cops telling us what they should do to us, that kind of thing. Now, that ties into economics in one way or another because of all sorts of other reasons, but not explicitly as the other things. But local is always better. Again, I have a certification in horticulture, big into organic gardening. One of the solutions for organic gardening to become more relevant and prevalent in our society is for it to go local, to set up local organic farms across the country in the areas, so you don't get a tomato all the way from California that's been sitting in a truck for 12 days. Okay, you can get fresh produce right from your own people in your community. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to community-based economics, a lot.
Well, you guys are definitely preaching to the choir, because I am big on community-based economics. I have like an entire plan that I want to work and introduce to the Green Party. And we're going to talk about that on a whole nother day. But right now, what I want to do is bring back Calvin. You were saying that you were really interested to come on this day because there was something about, did you say Amazon, that you wanted to go into? Yeah. What were you saying? So let's talk about that. I'm going to yield the floor to you with that.
So I am hosting a solidarity event where it's an educational event. So out of educate, agitate, organize, right now I'm doing an education, and hopefully that also helps propel an organization. And that is a solidarity event standing in front of a Whole Foods, passing out informational leaflets about the unionization of Bessemer, Alabama, Amazon warehouse workers unionizing. I think it's going to be one of the first major shops to unionize if it is successful. And I believe that brings more democracy to the workplace for them. And I hope it would cascade across the country, and there'd be a lot more union shops, a lot more people with collective bargaining power and democracy at their workplace. So I'm hoping that we all can, and there's 40 plus events already. I'm hosting just the one in Chicago. So around the nation, working class people, if they have time, if they're able to make it out, we really appreciate it. We're looking for people to pitch in for printing the leaflets, and for anyone else to come stand out in the cold with me. Be greatly appreciated. And I just want all workers who are fighting for their workers' rights to know that we support them and we're there for them, and we want to see them flourish, and we know that it's reciprocal too.
Well, that is awesome. I mean, because that is a huge thing, like you said, for workers to know their rights and to know that they're supported. When is this event taking place?
That's going to be the one that I'm hosting is this Saturday. So is that tomorrow? Yeah, we're already there.
That would be tomorrow.
That's going to be tomorrow, and that is at 2 p.m. I'm going to rough it out for 2 hours. If people are able to join and stay later, we'll stay later. We'll get the message out there.
Awesome. So if you guys are just now tuning in, and if you want to join Calvin, then definitely connect to the Green Party. Calvin, how can they connect to you specifically if they are not already members or volunteers with the Green Party?
Yeah, there is the event page. If you look up support Amazon warehouse workers.org, you can look up this event. And this is going to be at the corner of Belmont and Lincoln and Ashland. It's the three intersections there. They can reach me at my email, designcjt. There are postings. I've hit up all the Facebook pages on this, and there is an event on Facebook as well. Okay.
And you say it's www.supportamazonworkers.org.
Let me nail that down. Yeah. Oh, here it is. It is. I'm sorry. I did misspeak. It's supportamazonworkers.org. And then you can put in the /FEB for February 20th. So FEB 20. And that's going to take you directly to the page for that event and all the solidarity events across the country.
Gotcha. I just want to put it on like within our comment section, so that way if people come, whether they watch it live or on the replay, that they'll be able to see that, right? Because that is important for us to be able to come together to show solidarity and show our support. Rita, I saw you kind of nodding as he was talking, so come on and chime in a little bit to what your feelings are.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought up Amazon. I mean, picture a world where we can only buy from Amazon and it's brought by drone to your doorstep. What's going to happen to your community? I saw a posting by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. It's a group out of Minnesota. I think we've even had speakers at our meetings from there. But anyway, they say that if you use big box stores, And like Amazon, really a small percentage of your dollar stays in your community. They say 68 cents on every dollar stays in your community, but only 43 cents per dollar stays in your community if you use a big box store. So it's really important. If you think about the difference between a big box store like, Walmart, going to Walmart, or going to your mom and pop store. These are what I would call predator corporations. They're corporations that they function by putting others out of business, and then they raise the prices when they have a monopoly. So therefore, you lose your choice. You lose the diversity in your neighborhood. You lose the mom and pop store. And think about what these big box stores are getting. They're getting a tax break, first of all, to go into your community. And then so they're robbing the schools and the parks and everything else of the tax money that they should be getting. And yet they're getting this tax break. And as soon as the tax break ends, usually there's a sunset clause. Lots of times these big corporations will just book, they'll leave. And then your community is really starving. So they may give you jobs for a while, but a lot of times they are really low paying jobs, and they're externalizing costs. Like, for instance, I don't know if you guys ever saw this documentary called Walmart, The High Cost of Low Price. I think it's a high cost of low price. Anyway, you can see it on YouTube now, but it's kind of a bad version of it, but you probably can get it on other places online for free. But anyway, it shows that Walmart actually sets prices worldwide. And they'll tell producers, we're not taking it for unless it's under this price. And therefore, they're lowering wages in other countries for workers. Then they bring it to this country, and sure, you can get something cheap, but your tax dollars then are paying for the Medicaid and the food stamps that the workers need in order to just survive, because they have lower wages. Lots of times they'll say, oh yeah, we pay a living wage, but that's only for the full-time people. It's not for the people that are just working 20 hours a week, or they'll give people, they won't get any benefits unless they have full-time. So they give them 35 hours because they know 36 hours means full-time. So and there's a lot of wage theft too. There have been dozens of class action lawsuits against Walmart for having their manager tell the worker, you have to stay, you can't punch out, or you punch out, but you have to stay until the next worker shows up. So there's a lot of wage theft that goes on too. So the problem with going to the big box store is that you're not going to have somebody who will be invested in your community. Somebody who's going to live there too, probably, or live in the neighborhood, wants to see it thrive, wants to see their workers do well, who wants to keep their workers, not to treat them like tissue paper. And the other thing about mom and pop stores is, like, you can go to a mom and pop store and you say, hey, we got this event going on. Would you put my flyer in your window? And they'll do that. Or you'll say, hey, we're going to have a carnival at our school. Can you give us something for prizes? They'll do that because they're invested in your community. They're not getting a tax break, so they're going to stay. So it's just, people don't realize the high cost of that low price for your community. So that's just something that I wanted to bring up. And when you talked about Amazon, everybody thinks it's so convenient to get Amazon products at your doorstep, but the cost in the long run is going to be really severe.
I think that is absolutely awesome, the points you brought out, and I definitely want to give David a chance to add on. But before I do, I want to recognize those who are watching with us. I want to say hello to Mary Jackson and to Alan Cook. Alan remarked, he says, Amazon has most of the EBT food contract, which kind of goes into what you were talking about, Rita. And I want to also let our listeners know, our watchers know, if you all have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section, as well as your comments as well. But we do want to address, if you have any questions, we want to address them while the panel is here. But go ahead, David, and add on to what Rita was saying, because she discussed a lot of quality nuggets as it pertains to community-based economics, and we will transition, but I definitely want to give you a chance to comment.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Amazon is a very strange thing in a lot of ways. I mean, it offers I buy from Amazon certain things that I just can't find in my area. I buy a lot, mostly 99% of what I buy from Amazon are books. No
Mhm.
bookstore in my area has the books that I want to read. So that, and
Mhm.
most of it comes through, Kindle and that kind of thing. But as far as actual technology objects, food, whatever else, my community, my local areas provide all that for me. There's I live in Lake County. There's nothing I can't find as far as actual things. And I think Rita's absolutely correct. I mean, I've heard that same number before too. 68% stays in your community if you buy local from non big box stores. My pharmacy is in a Target. There's not much I can do about that right now, unless there's a more private, pharmacy around here, but I'm not aware of it. But I also want to add too, one of the things about the Ma Pa thing that's great is its charm. It's not just, it's just aesthetic, it's beauty, it's comfort. I mean, you hinted towards it when you said about putting up flyers and asking for donations for events and stuff like that, is that people know each other and you get to go in there and you can talk to people because you know them and that kind of thing. It's not this cold isolated event of going through a machine and swapping all your barcodes there and then just walking out. There's actually personality and personage and people to talk to and community to build from there. Mom and pop places are extremely important, and you're right, Amazon's a big threat to that, a huge threat to that. And so people need to be careful. Like I said, if there's something you just can't find in your community, I'm not opposed to using Amazon. But if you can find it in your community, I say you absolutely should.
Okay, so now that's actually a great segue, David. I'm so glad you ended there, because what I want to do is kind of throw in some double advocate type of situations, and I want all of you all to address it. So to the individuals who say, well, you know what, the big box stores, the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Targets, their prices are so much cheaper than a mom and pop shop. Then what would your rebuttal be to that as to why should they support it? If I am working off of the budget and if I know that it's going to be more expensive, then why should they still support the mom and pop shop over a big box store? Calvin, why don't you start?
My main thing is, a business is also the people who run it and the people who are necessary for it to function. And if those workers are members of your community and they aren't, one, being paid a wage that is livable, and then two, are working in conditions or being leaned on to work maybe when they're sick and otherwise should have paid sick leave, that your community is suffering. That somebody's going to be injured and can't go do the American pastime of play baseball with their kid when there's time. So you have to think as a conscious purchaser, a conscious customer, of the impacts that a major store might have. If it's all you can afford, we understand getting that. But if you can take a moment and look up a local mom and pop store, walk the extra block to get there and support your local community. Oh gosh, especially if they're a worker cooperative where they have some of the say in how that business is ran.
That's awesome. Rita?
I'd also add that, there's other ways to get things. First of all, sometimes you will find actually that the mom and pop store might be a little cheaper in some respects, but also there's the sharing community. There's the Craigslist and the free cycle and all of the ways that you can either barter or exchange goods without going to the big box stores. And I think that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. Also, you can't, it's not just that they're a big box store, it's that they are a predator corporation, so that they are actually preying on your community. So if you think about what Calvin said before about cooperatives, I just watched a Cooperatives Basics 101. You can get it on the University of Wisconsin-Madison site. And it told me about many places that I didn't know were cooperatives, like Ace Hardware is a cooperative. I didn't know that. Those are all individual stores that the only thing they cooperate on basically is that they do publicity together. And sometimes they have, that's why I always wondered why they were so different and they have such character. So there are places that you can go that will still support your community. Ace Hardware is a cooperative. I didn't know. Ocean Spray, Sunkist, Blue Diamond Almonds. There's lots of beers that you can buy, Fat Tire beer, and that's owned by the workers. So there are cooperatives that you can go to. Sugar Beet in Oak Park is a cooperative for food, and I know they used to have one at Hyde Park, but I don't know if they do anymore. I don't think it's survived, but I know there was Strawberry Fields in Champaign, and there's lots of cooperatives around so that you can get cheap food that's really good. So there are some other options. You don't have to go to a big box store in order to get the things that you need.
David?
I didn't know that either. No, that's very cool. That's excellent to hear. And when I'm done with the show, I'm going to get online and I'm going to look up even as many as I can. I had no idea about Ace Hardware. Now I have a good reason to stop going to Home Depot, which funded Trump's wall. So that's good to know. Again, I do horticulture, so I need that kind of stuff. I need tools. So that's very encouraging. And I don't know what else to say. I think that's great.
Well, I wanted to also bring up another avenue of community-based economics. And this is something that used to be a regular thing, especially in river towns. They would have their own power. The city would own the power company. Basically, everybody, we all owned the power in our community because they had a river coming through and they had hydropower. And now you can start community solar. So you can have your own community-based solar power. And then there's, unless the big companies try to get legislation passed to outlaw it, which is what happened with internet. Used to be that you could have community internet, and then the internet companies just pass laws in almost every state. I think we have one in Illinois where you can't have community internet. So, so it all comes down to politics. And that's another thing I want to bring up, because this week is your local time to vote for your local legislators, your mayors and townspeople. This week coming up next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is the primary. And it's it's the primary. So like I live in Berwyn, and we actually are one of the only communities that doesn't have non-partisan elections for our mayor and for aldermen. So we have partisan elections. So that's why we're in the primary February 23rd. But it's so important. These local legislators are so important because they're the ones that often will help keep the dollars in your community. They won't just give big tax breaks for big corporations. You need to hold them to the fire to keep the small businesses open and not overtax them.
I think those are all great points, Rita. And I want to kind of say a few different things. One, I love this panel discussion because it's really educating the people, right? And I think we say it every week in some regard that one of the reasons why we find the need to have these panel discussions is to provide a sense of education. Many times people do or don't do something simply because of a lack of knowledge, because they are not informed about other choices that they actually have, right? Like when you started going down the different list of co-ops, and David said, as I agree, I didn't know, and so I think there are a lot of times where just educating the people, hey, if you went here instead of here, if you did this instead of that, that giving people not just the choice, but an educated choice. Here, this is what you should do and why. So I think that we need to have more platforms where people are, I got you, Calvin, where people do understand the need for this, right? Because it can just become tradition. Hey, we always go to Walmart, or we always go here or there. And so when I understand, number one, what community-based economics are, when I understand, number two, how it is that it helps to benefit not just my community, but also me, then I may very well be more inclined to participate in some of these things that we're discussing. Go ahead, Calvin.
Okay, so I came in here all fired about like labor and businesses, but I'm going to change gears real quick. I'm going to start small and I'm going to work my way up. I want to mention these because it's just such a beautiful time to mention these. And these are other avenues of community economics. So starting on the smallest level, and this is mainly just forming community and checking with your neighbors. Hey, do you have old 2x4s or does anybody know carpentry? That is to create a Facebook group or an email list of your street. And then if there's already one of your street, of your neighborhood. I have just been connected with these as I was helping neighbors shovel out their cars in the back alley. And I was blown away by the idea of having a Facebook group of the street and being able to immediately communicate. I've felt like such an island sometimes here in Chicago, and the idea of being readily connected with everyone on my street sounds beautiful. And I even watched a story of somebody finding a lost dog that was in a community Facebook thread, and it was like such a thrill to be able to see that and celebrate. And then to go a little bit bigger, there are cooperatives that are not business-based, particularly. There's housing cooperatives. And that's where every tenant is a co-owner, and they all come together to make major democratic decisions. Even bigger than that, there are such a thing as land trusts or land grants that many municipalities, on up to the state level, on up to probably even federal level, where it talks a little bit about decentralization. It's not from the top down. You give a plot of land to a community, maybe it's been an abandoned sector for a long time, and the community then runs it and owns it for a long time. And then even bigger, the last big step of community economics I want to mention is that there is such a thing as a public banking system. I believe North Dakota is the only state that still has it in place. And both Republicans and Democrats that are in power there do not touch it. It is a sacred cow. They will not go near it. It is beloved by the community because it's a publicly owned bank. And it's one of the banks that gives loans and helps start new businesses like worker cooperatives. So it's like rapid fire, but I wanted to make sure I talked about like the different avenues outside of business strictly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because one of the things what we've kind of done over the weeks is we kind of start out small, talking about personally what we can do personally, and then we transition to, you know, the grander scale of things, because I think again it's important for people as individuals to know what role can I play, because a lot of times when we think politics, and I say it all the time, like I'm green to politics. So a lot of times when you don't know, you're working from that perspective of ignorance, of not knowing. So sometimes we have to take the time to explain it on a smaller scale in layman's terms. This is what you can do, because so many times assumptions are made that everybody should just know what decentralization is, or everybody should just know what community-based economics are, how it works. And a lot of times people don't just know. These are not things that are being taught on a regular basis. And so for those of you who may just now be tuning in, we are in discussion of community-based economics this week. This is week 6. We have been discussing every week each one of the 10 key values of the Green Party. And so I'm joined by Calvin, David, and Rita. And so we've really just been kind of giving you an explanation of what community-based economics are, how you can participate, how you can help the problem and not contribute to the problem, and the problem being decreasing the value of your individual communities. And so if you guys are interested in this and you want to know more about it, as well as our other values, or even becoming a member of the Green Party, then we welcome you to go to our website, which is www.ilgp.org, to join us. And if you heard some of the things that Dave was Calvin was talking about earlier, then there's a website on there as well, which is www.supportamazonworkers.org/FAB20. I know that's a lot, but you can go in the comment section and you can see that. And if there are any other Green Party issues or events that's coming up that you want to volunteer for, go to the website, the same website, www.ilgp.org/volunteer. And so I know we're just about having to wrap up. I had one other question I did want to bring to the forefront. So you know, in the whole thing, we were talking about nonviolence. So obviously the opposite of that is violence. When you guys think about last year and even some part of this year with all of the looting and the rioting that was going on, right? When we're talking about community-based economics, it's almost as though the assumption is that every community has these different stores or these different elements. And so whatever institutions that's needed, but every community does not. Every community does not have a bank. Every community does not have a grocery store or a mom and pop store or whatever. So if I am a part of a community that may not have something that I need for basic living, then what should I do to avoid going to or supporting a big box store? Anybody that wants to start, go ahead and take it.
Well, I would say something about that. First of all, I think that, I don't know if you guys know about the TIF districts. The TIF districts, which were actually David Orr of Cook County, the Cook County clerk, who was a former Cook County clerk. He just retired, but he was the one who actually exposed TIF districts as being a slush fund for mayors. But TIF districts are actually supposed to be a way that you can take money from taxes and put it towards developing blighted areas that really need business. They need they need just a financial kick in order to get them started. So, and if you notice, TIF districts are often used for other places that don't really need it. But your aldermen, your legislators, those are the people that can actually get something like this going in your neighborhood. They can use TIF money to give to an entrepreneur who wants to start a business. And, you know, obviously that's not going to help somebody who wants to walk out the door and go buy something right now. But I think that that we have to think about what's the source of the problem in the first place. What is the source of the problem? And a lot of times it is corruption in government. And if we would look at what we can do to use the resources that are available, but bring them down to your area, your community, your neighborhood, your ward, then you can get some of these things started. I mean, I felt terrible about what happened, and it's not recovered. I go up on North Avenue by me, and there's lots of stores that are completely boarded over. And I think that a lot of it is corruption in politics. And you mentioned a state bank. The Green Party is for a state bank in Illinois, and that's been one of the campaign promises of our candidates. But one of the cooperatives that you can use is your local credit union. Mm-hmm. Credit unions are a co-op. I think that using neighborhoods banding together to, if you get to know your neighbors and you can band together and you can start your own co-op, it's possible. But I hear you that the resources for different communities are starved, and that's corruption, and that's clearly corruption in politics. When you go down the street and one neighborhood is so much better off than another neighborhood that's just blocks away, to me, there's something wrong with that alderman. There's something wrong there. There's a problem. So because there's all of these TIF funds that are millions of dollars are sitting in a bank waiting for, to make Michigan Avenue look better in Chicago. I don't think that's what it's supposed to be used for. To build that sports complex for DePaul. No, that wasn't what it's supposed to be used for. It was supposed to help these communities that need more resources.
Mm-hmm. Come on, jump in, Calvin.
The best I can think of is a communally owned vehicle ride sharing together in the community. So not through an app for profit, but for mobilization. Sadly, right now, the way that our transit systems are focused is individual car ownership, which can be quite expensive on its own. So if everyone is focusing on maintaining their vehicle it might be better and more efficient to work together on maintaining a few vehicles and making those longer trips. But I think that is the aftermath of the problems with impoverished communities and all these policies that push business away and leave these communities out to dry. So I'd like to hear more on your guys' thoughts. That's all I could come up with.
David, and then I'll chime in.
All right. Well, I think that a big part of the problem with these, protests, these peaceful protests turning violent and burning down businesses and stuff, is that the collective of the people in these individual communities don't have any sort of sense of ownership of their own community. So and that a lot of that goes back to. Now I'm glad I brought up the whole cop thing, because a lot of it goes back to that. They don't even have, the cops have control over them. They don't have control over their own police department. This is a community-based entity, and they don't feel like they have control. The police can come in and just beat them up, kill them, and get away with it because of qualified immunity, and they feel like they don't have any control. So yes, it's an absolute shame that these things happen, because good, innocent people suffered economically from their businesses being destroyed. But if you allow, we don't have a true sense in this country of community-based economics. And a lot of it has to do with funding local businesses and gentrifying these areas, to gentrify these areas. But you have to get that sense of ownership to these people. And how do you do that? Well, you start localizing politics. Basically is what it comes down to. You localize politics, you localize communities, you localize healthcare. Like one of the things that, what happened to my screen? I don't even know. Why is my screen blurry? Anyway, one of the things I wonder about is but why is everybody waiting for the federal government to act on when it comes to healthcare? Why is everybody, the centralized healthcare system is probably what we're going to get eventually, and that's fine as long as everybody's covered. But why can't Berwyn, the town of Berwyn, provide its citizens with healthcare? What's wrong? Nobody's even talk about local communities providing their own citizens with healthcare. It doesn't even come up in conversation. We either have business owners doing it, we have the state government, federal government, or you're on your own. Well, why not a local entity? Why can't Mundelein, where I grew up, they could easily provide healthcare for people. You have local hospitals, you have local doctors, that kind of thing, and you can actually get rid of the insurance companies, which is a useless medium completely. I think that we just lack a sense of ownership of our own communities, because there's just too much external and top-down crap, whether it be from the aldermans in the local cities, whether it be from county boards chiming in on local communities and what they should do with their schooling and so on. The communities have got to just take possession of their everything in economics, in politics.
I think it's hardest in such a huge metropolitan area to have community-based economics, because you see yourself as part of this gigantic whole, and you don't see yourself, like I live in Berwyn, so we do have a sense in Berwyn, but it's still you're part of such a large. When I cross the street, I'm in another town, so it's almost like you're part of everything, and it's really hard to get this sense. If you're in like Champaign or someplace that's a smaller town, that's just surrounded by cornfields, then you definitely have the feeling that this is your community. But it's hard in Chicago, in the Chicago area, I think.
I totally agree, and I want to kind of insert this really quickly. I think one of the key issues that we're missing, that's not necessarily a green issue, is just the fact that the trust is gone. If you look at people, you have to trust your neighbor. You have to, a lot of times we don't even know who our neighbors are anymore. Like with this big massive snowfall, you probably have a lot more people that's coming out and trying to help each other. But in general, I stay, as you just alluded to, Rita, I'm an island to myself. I think that Calvin even said that, so I go to work, I come home. I don't talk to anybody in my block, on my block anymore, people that's in my neighborhood. And it used to be a different time. It used to be a time where community was a big issue. So I knew all of my neighbors. Neighbors helped each other. They look after each other's kids, all these different things that would happen. But because over time it's become more violent, you can't trust the person that's next door. So we kind of lost that sense of knowing one another, which then by default means that I'm not going to support someone that I don't know, right? And so it's easier for me to go out of my community to go and support somebody else's community, even if there was an entity in my own. We typically, like I think it was you, Rita, saying that we will go somewhere else. And so one of the issues I know is that there's a huge difference. If I'm in Chicago and what it looks like on the north side versus the south side, it's a huge disparity. If I'm on the west side versus the north side, it looks totally different. And again, whether you want to pinpoint it on the mayor or the alderman or whomever, there is no question that these neighborhoods are not all equal. There is no question that there are certain communities that prosper a little bit better than others. And so I think, like, because of that, it finds us in a catch-22 situation where what comes first. So don't go to the big box stores, but I don't have any mom and pop stores in my neighborhood. Don't do this, but I don't have that. So, okay, even if you're going to give me access to this, as you said, Rita, in the meantime, I still need certain things that I can only get. So like I know in the Pullman area, they relatively recently opened up the Walmart. So they opened up the Walmart. Why? Because there was nothing else. So now it's like the Walmart becomes the answer, because if you don't have a mom and pop shop here, so now instead, so it's a temporary answer to a big problem, right? So instead of, we know that you don't have a mom and pop shop in your area, so instead of us making you have to travel 10 and 20 miles, you can come right here to a big box store. You see what I'm saying? So like for many people, that still was a better solution than to have to go. So to me, the real solution is to make every neighborhood equal, to make every neighborhood have the same, allow them to have the same type of resources. Whatever your neighborhood needs, have those resources available to you, because if that's not going to happen, then you don't have a choice but to use those big box stores. So I'm just one woman, and that's just my perspective. But believe it or not, guys, we are already basically toward the end. We know we have to wrap it up a little bit early this week. And so what I want to do is start with each one of you. First of all, let me thank all of you for coming on. But I want to give each one of you a few minutes to just like end with any final remarks or anything that you would like for our viewers to know, whether it's specifically about community-based economics or anything that you have coming up. Now you have those 3 minutes to do so.
Okay.
Go ahead, Calvin. You start first.
I'll start it off. So please, I implore you, talk to your neighbors, get to know them, put up signs up the street saying this is our email list so we can be connected, we can communicate. I think that is a great start, is being connected with your neighbors, knowing how they're doing, and being able to be a helping hand to each other back and forth. Look up housing cooperatives, how they work. Check out what land trusts are. It's okay to ask government officials to look into these issues for you. Look into public banks. And then I wanted to speak real quick about mom and pop shops might be willing to set up a local kiosk. So make sure you're going to mom and pop shops to see if they're willing to set up something close to you, even if it is just a ordering point. Maybe they'll ship stuff out, because mom and pop shops want to be there for the community. That's what we've talked about. CPAC was mentioned, or Civilian Police Accountability Councils. I wanted to give that its name and its due. There's also a group called My Block, My Hood, My City, and that's where I found a connection for volunteering for shoveling. If there's elderly or otherwise unable to shovel out people, they can connect you with a text service. So check out My Block, My Hood, My City. And lastly is my Chicago Solidarity event in support of Amazon workers unionizing in Alabama. Thank you guys so much for your time and for allowing me on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Miss Rita, I'm gonna get to you last, David. We're gonna let the guests, and then we'll wrap it up with you. Come on, Miss Rita, what you want to hit us with?
Okay, well, I do want to reiterate that community-based economics, the first word is community. And if you don't have community, you really can't have community-based economics. So building community is really important. You know, everything down from, you know, having a block party and, like we said, you know, getting to know your neighbors, to, you know, going to your local farmers market. And those are events. Those are places where they're public places, and public space is really shrinking more and more these days. So you have to take advantage of those public spaces. One thing that I have learned, though, you have to be aware of regional planning. All these new regional planning people like CMAP, they can't. It's a top-down thing. They act like they want your input, but basically it's developers doing top-down stuff. So you have to be aware of certain things that look like they're good. You want to be aware of development boards that in your community, because it could be just a way for predator corporations to come in. So you have to be careful of these, and you have to be aware of the local politics, because even though you think, well, they don't have much power, they really do. In your local community, your aldermen, your city council people, those are the people that are going to decide on the future of your community and whether or not it exists. So I think that's really important. You have to be aware of any legislation that's favoring big business over small business, because they have much more power than small business people. And so like right now, during all of the COVID pandemic, who's been profiting? It's been a very small, all the big businesses. When you couldn't go to your mom and pop grocery store or your mom and pop, just any of these other stores. I guess you could go to a grocery store, but you couldn't go to any store other than a grocery store. And all these mom and pop businesses are suffering, but you could still go to Home Depot. You could still go to Target. You know, you were allowed to go there, but you weren't allowed to go to the mom and pop stores. It didn't really make any sense. So it's definitely, they're definitely favored over the small business. So you have to be aware of that and support your community businesses.
Awesome. Go ahead, David. You're going to have the final say on this.
Okay. Again, thanks for having me on. It's nice to meet both of you. Thank you. And actually, I'd like to talk to both of you about being on my radio show. So I need to get your contact information. I'll get it from Anna. Anyway, yeah, I think that one thing is like, what's the one thing we buy the most? Food, right? Probably the most as far as item count goes. Mm-hmm. So when the spring and summer comes, go to your local farmers markets. They're expanding all over the place. Buy from those local farmer markets. Encourage your local farmers, especially the organic ones, if you can. That's a huge step in the right direction. And secondly, what I would recommend is, in this country, maybe other countries too, I mean, we tend to focus on the president as like some sort of king or monarch that has all this control. Like the massive amount of attention to the presidential race is absurd in proportion to what actually presidents can do in this country. Focus on your local legislators, your local offices that are being elected for. They're the ones where this is where the rubber hits the road. These are the ones you're going to have to deal with day in and day out. And if you can empower your local political system, it might eventually take away from the external political systems from chiming in. Maybe not, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. So farmers markets and local politics.
Well, thank you so much for that, David. And for all of you all who have tuned in, thank you. And I want to give a special shout out to Lynn Joy, who was actually just sitting at Alan Cook's desk. Thank you so much for tuning in. But to everybody who tuned in, thank you all so much. And we hope that we have given you more of an understanding of what community-based economics are and how you can help, what it is that you can do. We like to make it practical, so that way is something that you totally understand where you may not have understood before. And so on next week, we are going to be on Key 7, which is feminism and gender equity, another favorite of mine. So we are asking that you guys please join us for next week. And as I always say, you got to tune in to know who the panelists are going to be. But we definitely want to say a special thank you to Calvin and to Rita, who are our guests. David, you are not even a guest, you're just at home. And so thank you, though. We still appreciate appreciate you for coming. We still appreciate your time, but we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. And then again, we want to remind you, don't forget to go to our website, www.ilgp.org, if you are looking to become a member of the Green Party. If you have questions, info@ilgp.org. And if you'd like to volunteer, ilgp.org/volunteer. And do not forget about Calvin's event that is coming up tomorrow. So if you want to join him, then go to www.supportamazonworkers.org/FEB20. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until next time, you guys stay inspired.
Thank you very much.